Well, good day to you all. This is Jim Ransom. Welcome all of you to another Morning Jim weekly excursion into poetry. English and American poets have been very busy about our winter holidays, so I'm going to read only a few of their offerings. The first poem is by Carl Sandburg, known best for his multi-volume biography of Abraham Lincoln, for which he was awarded a Pulitzer Prize. Perhaps less well known is that he also won 2 more Pulitzers for volumes of poetry. So without any more ado, I'm going to read his poem Fire Dreams, which is about Thanksgiving. In fact, in the epigram of this poem, it says, "Written to be read aloud, if so be, on Thanksgiving Day. I remember here by the fire, in the flickering reds and saffrons, they came in a ramshackle tub, pilgrims in tall hats. Pilgrims of iron jaws, drifting by weeks unbeaten seas, and the random chapters say they were glad and sang to God. And so, since the iron-jawed men sat down and said, 'Thanks, O God, for life and soup, and a little less than a hobo handout today,' since gray winds blew gray patterns of sleet on Plymouth Rock, since the iron-jawed men sang, 'Thanks, O God,' you and I, O child of the West, remember more than ever November and the hunter's moon, November and the yellow-spotted hills. And so, in the name of the iron-jawed men, I will stand up and say, yes, till the finish is come and gone. God of all broken hearts, empty hands, sleeping soldiers, God of all star-flung beaches of night sky, I and my love child stand up together today and sing, 'Thanks, O God.'" That's a powerful poem, I think. And Carl Sandburg, of course, as I mentioned, he won 2 Pulitzer Prizes for his poetry over many years' time. Now then, I have a poem to read you about butter. Butter, yes, butter, B-U-T-T-E-R. This is a poem by Elizabeth Alexander. She's one of the chancellors of the Academy of American Poets. And I haven't read one of her volumes of poetry, but I just love what she does with butter. So let me read you her poem, Butter. And you know, we're going to use a lot of butter at Thanksgiving. And just close your eyes and enjoy it. Don't think about anything else. My mother loves butter more than I do, more than anyone. She pulls chunks off the stick and eats it plain, explaining cream spun around into butter. Growing up, we ate turkey cutlets sautéed in lemon and butter and cheese on green noodles, butter melting in small pools in the heart of Yorkshire pudding. Butter better than gravy, staining white rice yellow. Butter glazing corn in slipping squares. Butter the lava in white volcanoes of hominy grits. Butter softening in a white bowl to be creamed with white sugar. butter disappearing into whipped potatoes, with pineapple, butter melted and curdy to pour over pancakes, butter licked off the plate with warmed Alaga syrup. When I picture the good old days, I am grinning greasy with my brother, having watched the tiger chase his tail and turn to butter. We are Mumbo and Jumbo's children, despite historical revision, despite our parents' efforts, growing from the inside out. 100 megawatts of butter. I think that's a very great poem, well crafted, and with a subject that most of us wouldn't even think of taking on, would we? I just love what she does with butter. If you think about what she said, it's almost like a recipe book for what to do with butter. Next, I have a poem by a poet named Paul Dunbar. Many of you may recognize that he was one of our first colored, as they said at the time, or black, as we might say now, or African American poets. Paul Dunbar. He was born in Dayton, Ohio, and he went to a very good school and high school. One of his classmates and friends was Orville Wright, who edited a school magazine to which Paul Dunbar contributed a poem. He got a good education, but his single mother had few resources, and he could not attend college. He befriended Frederick Douglass, who he met at some type of organization meeting, and he began to get his poems published in big-time newspapers, such as the New York Times. He was asked to make a reading tour of England, and when that was finished, he eventually was hired by the Library of Congress. But sadly, he got TB and died at age 33 in his mother's arms in Dayton. So, let's read the poem by Paul Lawrence Dunbar. And I need to tell you this. Dunbar wrote two kinds of poems. He said that one group were his major poems, and they were written in standard English. And his minor poems were written in the black patois of the era. And can you guess which poems were the most popular, the most called for when he traveled in England and made a good living reading his work? Yes, it was the so-called minor poems. I should tell you that early on he was befriended by Frederick Douglass, who was the most famous abolitionist who's still alive during Dunbar's career. And he was also championed and covered in the critical literature by William Dean Howells, who was a famous novelist at the time. And so he got quite a bit of help getting along, and he did well financially. So here's a poem about Thanksgiving that's entitled Signs of the Times. I'll apologize in advance. I'm going to read this in the patois in which it was written. And if I don't do a good job, don't hesitate to complain. I can take it. But I think it's better, and that's the way it was written, and I'm going to read it that way. Air getting cool and cooler. Frost a comin' in de night. Hickonuts and walnuts fallin'. Possum keepin' out of sight. Turkey struttin' in de barnyard. Nary a step so proud as his. Keep on struttin', Mr. Turkey. You don't know what time it is. Cider press commences squeaking. Eating apples stowed away. Chillin', swarming round like hornets. Hunting eggs among the hay. Mr. Turkey keeps on gobbling at the geese a-flying south. Oomph! Dat bird do know what's a-comin'. If he didn't, he'd shut his mouth. Pumpkin getting good and yaller. Make me open up my eyes. Seems like it's a-looking at me. Dis a-layin' down saying, pies. Turkey gobbler gwine round blowin', gwine round giving sass and slack. Keep on talking, Mr. Turkey. You ain't seen no almanac. Farmer walking through the barnyard, seeing how things is coming on, sees if all the fowls is fattening. Good times coming, shows you born. Here's dat turkey gobbler bragging, then his face breaking a smile. Never mind, you sassy rascal. He's going to nab you after a while. Chopping suet in the kitchen, stoning raisins in the hall, beef a-cooking for the mincemeat, spices ground, I smell 'em all. Look here, Turkey, stop that gobbling. You ain't learned the sense of fail. You old fool, you nake's in danger. Do you know Thanksgiving's here? Well, a translation of this may be available if you ask. But I hope you could understand it. It's a great poem, full of good humor and very, very seasonal. A little bit more about Paul Laurence at Dunbar. He never did, even though he made a pretty good living writing poetry, he never did get into the universities of the times, and it's not said in his biographical information that he even tried. And I'm glad about that because it might have ruined his ability to write in Negro dialect of the time. It was in 1897 when he embarked on a 6-month reading tour of England. I don't think I gave you the date on that. And he he also published a short story collection entitled Folks from Dixie in 1898 and a novel entitled The Uncalled, also in 1898. Unfortunately, he died a few years later, apparently of tuberculosis. But during the time he was sick, he contributed poetry for musical reviews that were carried out in New York at the time. Okay. That's it for today. I thank everyone who tuned in today to listen to these poems about Thanksgiving, and I pray that you all have a great Thanksgiving holiday. And thank you again for tuning in. I'll see you next week, I hope. Don't have my schedule very well in hand for next weekend, but I think we'll be able to do some poems. And I have some in mind written by a 93-year-old lady who has published a book of poetry that's thicker than the Holy Bible. That's the only hint I'm going to give you about next week. See you then. Bye now.